Welcome back again, guys. Hi, it's Cassim, and welcome to this question and answer session. So in this session, what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk to you and share some ideas with you on this question of how do I overcome really difficult times in my life. Usually I get many people ask me questions all the time. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to share with you my perspective and how I, as Kasim, have dealt with really difficult times in my life and how I genuinely think and how it is that I process really difficult times, and I hope that it can be of some value to you and in some way can help you in your life to become a higher, fuller expression of yourself. I've maybe looked down because I've made some notes to give me pointers for things to help remind me of things that I want to share with you, but let's go into it. So whenever I'm going through a difficult time, one of the first things that I always think about and always remember is that winter never lasts. And of course, when I talk about winter, I'm metaphorically speaking about dark times, about times when things are not going very well. You know, for the last 2,000 years of recorded history, we know that the world has essentially kind of read like this. Opportunity has been mixed with difficulty. We've either had wars, or we've had recessions, or we've had incredible high interest rates, when we're just talking economically, or we've had an abundance of house prices going up, we've had an abundance of community, of people getting together. And so even in our own lives, one of the things that I think is really important, and I always think about as Cassim, whatever it is that you're going through at the moment, mate, it can't last. We know for the last 2,000 years of recorded history that nothing lasts. Nothing. You know, even going down to the point of trees, we know that a tree, no matter how strong and stable that tree is, eventually, even after thousands of years, the same tree which has been fruitful, which has been strong, will eventually fall over, wither, and it will eventually die. So the great thing about that I constantly have to remind myself whenever I'm going through dark times is any time that I'm going through dark times, I know that after winter comes spring. So I know that something great is going to be coming in my life over the next horizon. Now, I don't know when that horizon is going to be. And for me, one of the things, especially when I'm going through difficult times, that I try to do is keep my head down, keep moving forward, keep going in the direction of my dreams. Because I know if I plant in the winter, I know that when spring comes along, I may have daffodils or I'm going to have a crop. Does that make sense what I mean by that? So that's the first thing. I always remind myself, Cassim, this dark times cannot last forever. Second thing that I always remind myself of is to breathe, is to become present, is to really begin to live in the now. Because one of the things that I wrote down here is that disappointment is a space between reality and expectation. Whenever I'm feeling like I'm not making progress, whenever I feel like things are going really bad or I'm going through a difficult time, it is usually because I don't feel like I'm moving forward. It's usually because I don't feel like I'm getting what I want. It's usually because I feel like something is stopping me from achieving my objective. And many times I have to remind myself that, Cassim, if you stay in the present moment, if you live in the now, then you can't think about the future, which means then you can't be disappointed. If you don't think about the past and what mistakes you've made, then you can only live in the present moment and use this present moment to do the best thing that you can possibly do and to take a step in the direction of wherever it is that you want to go towards. And amazingly, if you keep making the right choices and you keep stepping in the right direction towards where you want to go, inevitably winter will finish, you'll get into spring, and you would have made it through that winter. So I always remind myself, Cassim, just breathe, okay? Sometimes I do meditation. Sometimes I go through prayer. You know, a lot of us, we associate prayer with religion, but actually prayer is really about attuning you to the present moment. It's about aligning your frequency. It's about aligning your desires and your needs with the needs of the universe. For example, I will meet some people, or even just talking in my own life, I will be in a situation where let me go back and actually give you a perfect example of this. So about 5.5 years ago, I went through a situation where I discovered that my purpose on this planet was to be a teacher, was to help other people become their highest, fullest expression of themselves. And I went through a really dark winter of my life, and I became very depressed, because the life that I had dreamt for myself is not what the universe or God or whatever you want to call it dreamt for me, right? And I was like, yeah, but I don't want to be a speaker. I don't want to put myself out there, right? I just want to live what I call the Nando's life. And all of the pain started happening when I started resisting the flow of life, when I stopped, when I really fought against the as-isness of life. And when I started, a bit like a water flows with the rhythm of the ocean, or it flows down the stream, all of a sudden I started to see that my life didn't struggle. I didn't struggle as much. I began to see that I began to make progress in my life. I began to notice that abundance was starting to happen in my life. You know, many of you who are listening to me, you may be in a situation where you're in a relationship when you know you shouldn't be in the relationship. And so what you're doing is, you're not really paying attention to the present moment. You're not really paying attention to your desires right now. In the past, a relationship might have served its purpose, and the person might have been amazing, and you had an incredible relationship. But for your needs today, it no longer serves you. And you, a lot of the time, to evade the reality of today, think about the good old times, or you think about things distracting you, your kids or your friends, or going on holiday, or your work. And that is causing you to kind of be in this state where you're going through a really dark winter in your life. And what I would share with you is, if you can align yourself with the present moment, if you can align yourself with the universe and the flow of life, that is when you will be able to have a lot more abundance than what you're experiencing right now. The next thing that I do and I think about is that I remember my significance and why it is important that I keep going. And I want to combine this with my why. So many of you know that I've realized a long time ago, about 6 years ago, that the goal of life was not to live for a long time. The goal of life was to end up finishing. So the way that I live my life is not to try to live for 150 years, even though I appreciate that, of course, I've got to have preservation for my life, I've got to have vitality, and of course I don't want to just die like tomorrow. I want to try to, live for as long as possible. But my motivation and my intention isn't to live for as long as possible. My intention and motivation, and the center for which I live my life, is to finish. Is to get to the point where I'm on my deathbed and say, I'm done. There is nothing more that I could have done. And I constantly have to remind myself that, Cassim, you have to keep going. You have to overcome whatever it is that you're going through. You have to be positive. You have to be somebody who is a beacon. You have to be somebody who shows the light and goes first. Because in this lifetime, if you become depressed, if you stop going after your dreams, if you stop trying to be somebody that goes and does things so that people can see you go and do things so that they can also go and do things, then you are going to become what I call a generational thief. And then you're actually, Cassim, going to become a hypocrite. Because how can you tell other people to follow their dreams if you're not following your dreams? How can you tell other people to stay strong and persevere through the difficult times if you're not doing it? So I constantly have to remind myself that, I am here on this planet for a reason. I didn't just arrive here. I could have been born 100 years ago. I could have been born 200 years ago. But it seems that the universe, God, whatever which is bigger than ourselves, seems to have arranged it that I was born now. That my parents had to meet at a certain time, that my mum had to be in the right room, and my dad had to be in the right state of mind and had to be seen. Everything had to align for my parents to get together so that I was born. Everything had to align so accordingly that I could get here and be sat here and talk to you today, right? And there's a lot of things that need to have taken place for us to be, for you to be listening to me, and for me to be talking to you. Does that make sense? So I constantly have to remind myself of my significance. I can't afford to give up. I can't afford to give in, because whatever it is that I have to offer this planet, I only have about, roughly speaking, according to the UK life expectancy, I have about 81 years. I actually technically don't have about 81 years. I have somewhere in the region of about 60 years, less than that, right? About 50 years or so. So 50 years is a very short time. I can't afford to be constantly being stopped by everything. I can't afford people to constantly I can't afford to be constantly operating my life from what people tell me cannot be done, from the opinions of other people. I just can't. My life is too important to people like you guys who need me to do this kind of video. It's just too important, right? So that's what I always think about. The other thing that I think about when it comes to this is I start journaling about what I'm going through. You know, part of the reason why I started journaling is because, you know, many of us never reflect in life. Many of us never realize the journey, how far we've come, right? What we've been through to get to the point of where we've been, because a lot of the time we forget. And so part of the reason why I journal is that whenever I'm going through a difficult time, I will go back through my journals to other difficult times and remind myself, Cassim, you've gone through similar things to this. Look how far you've come. Look how many hurdles you've overcome to get here, right? Look at all the people who said to you it could not be done. Look at all the people who said to you it's going to be impossible, and yet look how far you've made it to get here today. And I constantly have to be in this state where I'm reminding myself of this. And I would encourage you to remind yourself of the journey that you've taken to get here today. The other thing that I always try to do is that I always have to remind myself of the hero's journey. So if, for those of you who are not aware, there was a really, actually, coincidentally, weirdly enough, it's the book which is here. I was looking at this very book because I was writing it, as I've been editing my book, I've been writing about it. So Joseph Campbell wrote a really interesting book where he studied thousands of different basically stories, and every story seemed to have this kind of cycle where basically you'd have a hero, and the hero has like what he calls a call to action, which is basically something goes wrong in the hero's life, and then they choose to whether they're going to go after it or not. And one of the things that happens in the hero story is that every hero story that we all know, the hero at some point has to reach some obstacle. Nobody can be called a hero unless they have had something which they've had to overcome. And so whenever I'm going through difficult times, I always have to remind myself, Cassim, if you want to be a winner, to win means you have to defeat something. For you to be a champion, to conquer, right, mandates that you have something to fight, that you have something to battle, that you have something which is a force which is going against you. And what I would say to you in your own life is, look at the challenges and the winter that you're going through as a building block to your story. Because a lot of us, many years ago, the way that I used to see my life is I used to see my life in pictures. So in snaps, sometimes when you go on Instagram or Facebook, it's very easy to look at somebody's life or picture and they look amazing. But the reality is that's not really how their life is, right? Or maybe you've looked back at a photo of yourself and you've been smiling in that photo, but you remember what you were going through at that point. You were depressed, your relationship was in absolute shambles, your job was absolutely terrible, but yet when people look at the picture, they think everything was perfect, right? And so I stopped looking at my life in that way, and the way that I looked at my life was like an arc. I looked at my life as a journey, right? As a movie. And I was like, okay, well, what point of the movie am I in now? So if I've been watching a movie, the way that I, as Cassim, define a really good movie is that for me, a good movie, the hero at some point, or any person has to at some point be defeated. You have to be defeated, because I love a movie where the person comes back after defeat. After all hope is given up, but they come back. And so for me, that's the way I actually see my life. Every time that I have a challenge or I have a really difficult time in my life, I'm like, okay, this cannot defeat me. I know it can't defeat me because my story cannot end like this, which means I've got to conquer this. I've got to overcome this. I've got to get through this. And I would share with you that you can get through it. And I would encourage you to think in that kind of mindset. The last thing that I want to share with you, which I've found useful whenever I'm going through difficult times, is to remember that I'm my mum's son. Now, I know that may sound a bit weird and you may be thinking, what do you mean by that? I've had to remember who my mum is. My mum did not raise a loser. My mum did not raise a single child by herself, go through all the things, working double nights, working double shifts, working through the night to raise a son who ends up becoming a failure, who ends up not doing anything significant in his life. And so every time I'm going through a difficult time, I always have to remind myself, Cassim, please do not die. Do not allow, because look, I know that at some point the reality tells us, okay, and I tend to deal with reality. I know that the reality tells me that my mum is probably going to die before me. Now, that doesn't mean that I want my mum to die. That doesn't mean that, you know, that my mum is going to die. I'm just saying reality tells us that at some point my mum is going to pass away. My mum isn't going to live forever, right? And I constantly think in my head, Cassim, ensure that when your mum dies, she feels in her own heart, my son will be okay. Cassim will make it. He will be all right, right? Cassim, I know that if I leave Cassim, he will figure it out. I know that if I leave Cassim, he will make it through. My worst nightmare would be that my mum gets ill, or my mum, because my mum is that sort of person. My mum, even though she's ill, if I'm ill, she would pretend that she's not ill to look after me. And so I constantly have to remind myself, Cassim, ensure that your mum gets the message that you will be okay, that you will battle through anything, that even if you fail, in fact, actually, weirdly enough, my mum said this to me. My mum said, we were talking about this channel and Cassimotive and my videos, how my mum said to me, you know what, Cassim, I've always known that even though, basically I was explaining to my mum that I was working in Tesco's, and many people see me in Tesco's and they think, Cassim, God, you know, you're destined to be, you know, doing something much better than working in Tesco's. And I say to my mum that sometimes, you know, I feel like people are looking down on me and they think like I'm a bit of a loser. And my mum was like, Cassim, you know, I've always known deep down that no matter what you do, when you set your heart to it, I know it may take you 10 years, 20 years, but you will always end up doing it. And that kind of put a really nice piece in my life. And so that's what I would encourage you to do. Find maybe somebody in your life who is really important to you, and remember that you want to ensure that when they pass away, they're at peace, that they're not worrying that you're not going to be okay. Live such a life that your parents know that you will battle through anything. Even if be the kind of person where when you get into a relationship, even though your parents don't agree with the relationship, they know that if it doesn't work out, you will be okay at the end of it, right? But as I say to you, a lot of people get into relationships, their parents don't agree with it, and their parents know their child won't overcome it, and so that's why their parents are very cautious. That's essentially how I deal with winters in my life, and that's the kind of psychology and the kind of mindset that I tend to put myself in. And I don't know whether it's helped you out or it's been useful, but thank you very much for watching. And if you have a Q&A, if you have a question that you want me to share how I overcome it, don't be shy, ask away, and I will do one of these every single week. And hopefully I should be able to answer your question. Thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.